There you are. I hoped you'd come tonight. Come in out of the cold. Mind the loose board. You'll know the one if you've sat with me before. There's a chair by the fire that's kept the warmth of it all evening, and the kettle's just boiled, and you've timed it well, because I was about to lay the table for supper. No, sit. It's no trouble. Laying a table's the least trouble there is, though there's a house down the harbour end where it turned out to be the most trouble in the world, and a woman I buried this spring who's laying hers still. I'll get to her. It's Friday. The dark's down early, and I've kept this story back a good while for the right night. This is it. It's a story about supper. This one, about the one plate on the table that nobody eats from. You'll have something like it where you're from. Most places do, if you go back far enough. Only ours, we've long since agreed to forget the reason for. I mean to give you the reason back tonight. And then, fair warning, before you sleep, I'm going to ask you to lay one more place at your own table. And I think, once you've heard me out, you'll not need asking twice. So let me lay ours while I tell you, and keep me company. I'd not want to sit alone tonight of all nights. Round here we lay one more place at the table than there are people to sit down. Always have. However many are eating, you count the heads and set one more, a plate, a cup, knife and fork, and the chair drawn out a little, the way you'd leave it for someone still on their way. And that place gets served first, before the children, before yourself, however hungry you are. A little of everything onto the empty plate, and only then do you feed the living. We tell strangers it's so no one ever comes to a Coldharbor door and goes away hungry. Which is true, as far as it goes. Walk into any house here on their worst night of the year, a face none of us knew, and you'll find a place already set and filled, as though we'd been waiting on you all along. Nobody eats alone here. Nobody's ever quite a stranger. The visitors call it lovely, and we smile and don't correct them. But there's an older reason under the warm one. There nearly always is with the old customs, and it's a poor host who frightens his guests before they've eaten, so that part can wait. For now, just hold the one thing, the extra place, the plate we set and never sit at. Everything I've got to tell you tonight is laid on it, and everything I understand about it I came to too late, taught by the woman who kept the truest table in this town, and her in the ground since the spring. Now, if you'd asked anyone in Coldharbor who kept the truest table in town, they'd have said Loveday Pascoe before you'd finished the question. Loveday lived down the harbour end in the long, low house with the blue door, where the lane bends round to meet the water. You'll have seen it. She lost her husband young and never took another, and her children grew up and went off up country the way they do. So, for the best part of 30 years, she lived in that big house on her own. Which is to say, she lived there with one empty chair, same as the rest of us, except that Loveday laid hers like she meant it. The truth is, most of us had let the custom go slack. A plate shoved on, the chair half pulled out, and not really. You know how a thing gets when you've done it 10,000 times and stopped remembering why. But not Loveday. She set the guest's place with the best plate off the dresser, the good blue one, polished the cup, and turned the chair out just so, as if whoever it was for might walk in that very minute, and she'd not have them feel unwelcome for a second. And it was Loveday who kept the harvest supper. Every year, the end of October, she'd have the whole town crammed into that long room, every chair she owned and half of everyone else's carried down the lane, 40 of us eating and talking till the lamps burned low. And at the head of the table, one place laid finer than all the rest, served first and served fullest, and left. The best seat in the house, with no one in it. Children used to dare each other to sit there, and their mothers would go white and haul them off it by the collar before they could. Quick, and never able to tell you afterward why they'd move so fast. I never sat in it either. 40 years of harvest suppers, and I never once took Loveday's extra chair. And not once in all that time did it cross my mind to wonder why not. She died in March, in her sleep. 81, and sharp as a tack to the last. The children came down for the funeral, stood about, not knowing anybody, and went home again, and the blue-doored house at the bend of the lane was shut up and left. End of an era, we all said. Poor Loveday. That'll be the truest table in Coldharbor, gone cold now. And then, a week after we buried her, I was walking home past her place in the blue of the evening, and I looked in at the kitchen window, the way you do, and the table was laid for two. The good blue plate at the guest's place, polished, catching the last of the light. The chair turned out just so, as though she'd only stepped into the scullery a moment and would be back directly to call us all in. And do you know what went through me? Stood in that lane at dusk with the light going, looking in at a laid table in a dead woman's house? Not a chill. Relief. Something in me eased, and I thought, there she is, still keeping it. Bless her. Death itself couldn't make Loveday set a careless table. One of the children must have done it before they left, we decided. A sweet thing. Lay your mother's table one last time, the way she liked it. Very like the Pascoes, except the children had gone home on the Monday, and I saw that table laid on the Thursday, and again the Thursday after, and each time the blue plate, well, I'll come to the blue plate. So one afternoon I let myself in. Broad daylight, mind, the door was on the latch, because down the harbour end we've never locked either. And I stood in Loveday's kitchen and had a proper look. Laid for two, just as it looked from the lane. Her place and the guest's. But the guest's plate, the good blue one, wasn't clean the way you leave a laid table. It had been used, wiped after, carefully, but used. There's a particular shine a plate only gets from a fork gone over it, and you know it the moment you see it. There was a ring dried in the bottom of the cup, and from Loveday's own larder, the last of her flour, her salt, the little jar of jam she'd made, a spoonful of each had been taken and served onto that plate and eaten some night that week in a house where nobody had lived since March. Somebody was still setting Loveday's place, and somebody was eating it. I stood there in the good, clean daylight, and honestly, I couldn't decide which of those two I less wanted to be true. So I did what you'd do. I put the plate back on the dresser, latched the door behind me, and went home and told myself a story I could live with. A tramp. Some hungry lad who knew the house stood empty and the door stood open, coming in for a bite, and, being a decent enough sort, washing up after himself. Kinder to leave it a mystery than to make a fuss. And for a few weeks I let it lie. We all did. Nobody went down the harbour end after dark, but then nobody much ever had, and nobody said why. Only lately, it's not just Loveday's table any more. It started with the Truins up our end, a nice young family. Took the little cottage by the chapel. They weren't from here, so they'd learned the custom of the rest of us. And to their credit, they kept it properly. Extra place, served first, chair drawn out. And one morning the Truin girl comes down to lay the breakfast, and the guest's plate from the night before, which she'd set clean and left clean, because of course nobody had come, is sitting there used, wiped and put back, but used, and the chair pulled out and turned round to face the room. And she thought what you'd think. One of the boys walking in his sleep, or having a joke on her. So she washed it up and said nothing, but it nagged at her, and she mentioned it to her husband, and he mentioned it to me, because word had got round by then that I'd taken an interest in Loveday's table. And so I asked if I might sit up a night in their kitchen. They were glad to have me, truth be told. They'd gone off the dark in that room. Now I sat up with the lamp out. My own doing. I'll grant you it was a foolish thing to do, and I'll tell you why it was foolish before I'm done. But I wanted to see the room, the way the room is when we're all asleep in it. So I sat in the dark and watched the laid table, the extra place set clean, the chair drawn out, and for hours there was nothing at all, just the rain on the glass, and the fire going to ash, and the family asleep over my head. And then, somewhere near 3, that flat dead hour when even the water in the harbour seems to hold still, I heard the chair. Not a scrape, the way a chair goes when you knock it with your knee. It was a draw. Slow and easy and certain. A chair being pulled out by someone who's done it every night of a long life and is in no hurry whatsoever. Pulled out, turned, and then settled under a weight. And then, 3 feet from me in the black, with my heart going like a fist on a door, something began, very quietly, to eat. I didn't move. I've told myself since that I chose not to, that I kept my nerve. But the honest truth is that I couldn't. I sat there and listened to the guest take its supper off that good clean plate, and somewhere in the middle of it I understood the thing we'd all let ourselves forget. Why we serve that plate first, and never let it go empty, and turn the chair out just so. It isn't so the guest feels welcome. It's so the guest stays a guest. Then the eating stopped. And there's a particular silence that comes after. You'll know the one, the silence of a room that's just worked out it isn't empty either. And I sat very still, and I thought, as plainly as I'm saying it to you now, I have made a mistake. I have sat down in the dark, with no light on, at a table with it. And there are 2 of us in this room, and only one place laid. I don't remember getting up. I remember the lane, and the cold, and my own front door, and being surprised to find it was nearly light. The Truins found me on their step in the morning, grey as ash, and were kind enough not to ask. I went back in the daylight. I always go back in the daylight now, and I'll tell you plainly what I found, because plain is the only way I can get it out. The plate was clean, wiped and cold and shining. The chair was pulled out and turned to the room, and on the seat of it, on the flat of the wood where a person sits, there was a wet mark, dark and spreading, and it smelt of the harbour at low tide, cold mud, old salt, and under that something I won't try to name for you, because I've no name that would do you any good. a wet mark on a dry chair in a locked-up morning kitchen, as though the guest had sat there a long while, as though it had come a very long way, up out of somewhere cold, to keep a place that had been kept for it 300 years, and had found at last that a plate wasn't quite enough for it any more. I told you there was an older reason, and that we'd come to it when the plates were cleared. Well, they're cleared. So I went and asked the old ones, the ones older than me, who had it from their old ones, and who didn't want to tell me. And once they had, I understood why not. It's the same winter under all of it. If you sat with me for the tale of the lights, you already know the shape of it. Coldharbor was founded in the bad winter of 1698 by people who'd come down the coast in a hurry, running from something the records take great care not to name. 40 of them, give or take. The old ones always say 40, and I'll let you make of it what you like. That 40 was the exact number Loveday sat at her harvest table every year of her life. They didn't arrive on their own. Something came in off the road behind them. Or something was already here, and glad of the company. The stories differ, and I've stopped thinking it matters which. What I do know is that by the first thaw, 9 of the 40 were in the ground, and the ones still standing had started laying their extra place, that December in the teeth of it, not before. What matters is the arrangement they came to, because you can't drive a thing like that off. I told you as much, with the lights. You can't kill a dark that's taken a liking to you, but an old hungry thing that's come in cold off a long road that you can feed. And a thing you're feeding is a thing that's still a guest. It'll sit at the foot of your table and take the first and the best of what you have. And so long as there's a plate for it, its own plate, set apart, served ahead of your own children, it stays where a guest stays. It doesn't want your chair. It's got one of its own. So there's your extra place, the whole of it under the pretty part. We don't lay it so a stranger's never turned away. We lay it so the guest is never hungry enough to stop being a guest. Because a guest with no plate doesn't leave, not up here. It looks round your table at all the warm, well-fed faces, and starts to wonder which of them is sitting in its seat. The old ones kept one thing back for last, and told it quietest of all. You always lay one more place than there are living. One over the true number, never the number exactly, because the table keeps count. As long as a place stands empty, the guest is that empty place. Whoever's not arrived yet, still expected, still out on the road somewhere. But fill every chair, get the number exactly right, and the table can no longer tell the guest from the family. Every seat filled, every plate used, and it's simply one of you now. Always has been. Pass the bread. The empty plate is the whole of what keeps it a stranger. The moment your table's full and the count comes out right, it's home. So, Loveday. Loveday kept the truest table in town because Loveday's was the biggest. The harvest supper. 40 of us. The richest board in Coldharbor, and one place at the head of it laid like a king's and left cold and full. She fed the thing well, year on year, better than any of us fed ours. She kept it fat and easy, and in no hurry down there at the harbour end for 30 years. That was her light kept burning on the lane, if you like, the porch and the switch of the last tale made over into a laid table. The truest table in town stood at the head of a line none of the rest of us knew we were standing in, And then, last spring, she stopped. Not by choice, but she stopped. The plate still gets laid, mind. The house remembers what it's for, even with Loveday gone. But a laid plate in an empty house is a thin sort of supper, and it's gone hungry down there at the bend of the lane. And a hungry guest goes visiting. It emptied Loveday's first, then started up the lane from the water, house by house, remembering as it came what 30 fat years had let it forget, that a plate can be enough, or a plate can be not quite enough, and all the difference between the two is only ever appetite. Well, that's as much of the tale as has happened up to this Friday, with you and me and the fire and the table there behind us laid. You'll have noticed I set it for one more than the two of us. I hope you'll not mind. It's habit, and it's more than habit. And I rather think after tonight you'll understand me. I did tell you it wasn't finished. Let me give you the last of it, and then I'll send you home while there's still a good while to go before 3. My house is up our end, by the chapel, 2 doors along from the truants. 1 cottage between us, the old Kerrow place, shut up and empty since Kerrow himself went, which is to say, the guest has been coming up the lane toward me for a fortnight now, a table at a time. I've counted the nights and done the sum, the way you'd check a bill twice, hoping it comes out different, and it doesn't. Loveday's, then the Truins, a night to each, and the Kerrow place in between with no supper laid in it at all, nothing to sit down to, nothing to hold it even the one evening. So it won't wait there. I've a fair idea whose plate is next up the lane. So these last few evenings I've laid the finest place I know how. Loveday's own way, the best plate, the cup polished, the chair drawn right out and turned just so, served first and served fullest, the best of everything in the larder onto that plate before I take a bite myself. I had been the very best host in Coldharbor this fortnight, and I've meant every mouthful of it, because I would very much like to stay a host and not become a chair. And last night I laid the 2 places, mine and the guests', and I sat down to keep it company through the small hours, the way you're meant to, the way I did not do at the Truins, in the dark, with the lamp off, like a fool who'd forgotten his own story. Last night I kept the lamp lit, and I sat, and I waited, and somewhere I must have gone under, the way you do at my age, in a warm chair by a low fire, and I woke this morning cold through, with my head down on the kitchen table. Both plates cleared, both cups drained, everything wiped and put right and shining, and I don't, for the life of me, remember eating. Very likely I did. Very likely I woke in the night hungry and ate my own supper and the guests' besides, and washed up half asleep, and simply don't recall it. People do stranger things in the small hours. That's very likely all it is. Very likely. Now, you've been good company, and it's late, and you've a table of your own waiting wherever you're bound. So, before you go, and I mean this the way we mean it here, which I don't think is quite the way you meant it when you sat down, lay one more place than there are of you. Tonight, wherever you are, it costs you a clean plate and a minute, and it says the one thing worth saying. You're expected. You've a place here. You've no cause to go wanting anyone else's. Give the guest the first of the meal and the best of it. Don't be mean with the dog. Meanness is what turns a guest. And if you should sit down to your supper one evening and find you can't account for an empty chair, if every place is filled and the numbers come out right, and you can't quite say who that is in the last seat. Only that they've surely always been there, haven't they? They must always have been there. Don't ask their name, don't catch their eye. Just pass them the bread and say it kindly, so it hears you. You're welcome at this table. And then get up easy, no sudden moves, and leave them to their meal. It's only manners. It's the oldest we've got. Sleep well. The fire's lit again next Friday. Mind how you go.